Tonight's episode of Legacy Battle is brought to you by Atlas Benefits.
Atlas Benefits has solutions for your insurance needs. Atlas Benefits can help you obtain Medicare, health, or life insurance and employee benefits. You can find them on the web at www.atlasbenefits.com.
Or you can contact Rob Ducey or Roy Smith at 727-600-2892 and mention Legacy Battle Podcast. Atlas Benefits has all the solutions for your insurance needs. Enjoy the show. This is Legacy Battle. Make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Safari, iHeartRadio. I think I said that one already. Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts. We're on everything. Hit that subscribe button. I'm Michael Adams, creator of Legacy Battle. My panelists tonight from the Gridiron Battle Zone, Brian King. Also from the Gridiron Battle Zone, Dion Reed. From Steelers Nation South, Rollo Cawthon. Our special guest tonight, we're joined by a 13-year NFL veteran cornerback out of Purdue. You can see that picture of Purdue behind Dion there.
Oh.
Played with the Vikings, Chiefs, the team that is now the Washington football team, but at that time it was the Redskins. And, of course, the Houston Oilers. He's a two-time Pro Bowler. He's got a first-team All-Pro. He has 43 career interceptions. He's been an assistant coach for several football teams, including the Chargers and most recently the New York Guardians. He's a Kentucky Pro Football Hall of Famer. Cornerback Cris Dishman. Cris, thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate you.
It's going to be a good one tonight. We are debating the top 5 Oilers/Titans franchise all-time defensive players. So we'll be talking 8. We'll vote in the top 5, and we're going to get this started tonight with Jurrell Casey.
Yeah, so I would represent Jurrell Casey tonight. Jurrell Casey, 3rd round pick, 77th overall out of USC. As you mentioned, I'm out of the gridiron, so we might as well talk about the gridiron. And one of the toughest guys in his era. He played with the Titans from 2011 to 2019. Of course, spent his last year with the Broncos, but over his career, played 142 games. He started every game that he's played in his career except 2. He's been consistent as far as actually starting games until his late career with the Broncos. In his 139 games with the Titans, he's racked up 507 tackles, 51 sacks. As a defensive tackle, 51 sacks, 85 tackles for loss. He also has 15 pass deflections. During that time with the Titans, he was a 5-time Pro Bowler. Also, that was 5 consecutive years, the only one to do that in that time period. And he was first-team All-Pro in 2013.
So, Cris, with Jurrell Casey, he was a dominant player just this last decade, but he kind of flies under the radar. And then he spent his last year in Denver. I always hate to see when the players go away for that one last season and then they retire. You always want them to retire on their own team. But what are your thoughts on Jurrell Casey?
Well, Jurrell was a good player. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler. Anytime you can make the Pro Bowl 5 times in the position he played, you can tell he was a very dominant player. You know, being in the trenches like that and able to make the Pro Bowl. So you have offensive linemen, you have people actually, trying to cut you on each and every play and in contact in each and every play. So I can see a strong case for Jurrell for far as being up there. I can really see that because, like I said, anytime you make the Pro Bowl 5 times, it's big, it's huge.
Do you feel he has Hall of Fame numbers?
Considering the Pro Bowls, considering the tackles, I say yes. It depends on, is he a first-time ballot? I don't think he's a first-time ballot, but he has potential to be in the Hall of Fame.
It's really hard to get somebody in on a first ballot in the
Well,
NFL.
well, that position itself is hard to get in on first ballot. You have to be your Reggie Whites and stuff like that. You have to be those type of players. But Jarrell is not in the Reggie White class, but he's close to Reggie White. But he's not in that type. He wasn't that type of player. But I think he should be able to get into the Hall of Fame.
Well, let's stay on the D line here. Let's go to Curly Culp.
All right, Curly Culp. Yeah, I mean, a defensive tackle, a nose tackle. When Culp was in college, he was a NCAA wrestling champion. And so I think this really contributed to how he was able to just battle there in the trenches during his career. He learned about leverage. He was already had the size. He was 6'1", 265 pounds, had natural abilities, and just a really, really tough nose tackle to deal with. Culp, he started with the Chiefs, and in Super Bowl IV, Hank Stram realized that when he put him over center in front of Mick Tingelhoff, that this was like a big mismatch. And Tingelhoff was a really good center, but he did this, and this matchup turned out to really be one of the biggest stories of the Chiefs' victory that day. So a few years later, the Chiefs dealt Culp to the Oilers, and Bum Phillips really felt like Culp could, really vastly improve the defense. And it turns out he was right on the money. The Oilers, they gave up a first-round pick for Culp, but it was well worth it. The Oilers' defense was ranked last in 1973. Midway through the season, 1974, they acquire Culp, got him up to 18th in the final 8 games there, and then the defense was ranked 5th in 1975 after a full season with Culp. So you could see the improvement. Speaking of 1975, it was his best season, 11.5 QB sacks, which is a really high number for a nose tackle. And, because the nose tackle is usually just somebody, you kind of occupy blockers, take up space, get in the run, try and stop the run game. But he was able to get out after the QB as well. Some people really feel like he was unblockable at times when he was on. Hall of Fame center Jim Otto once said Curly Culp was perhaps the strongest man I ever lined up against. And then the Chiefs' great quarterback Len Dawson once said that centers in the NFL felt that they had to go up against Culp in order to see where they stood against the best. Culp made 6 Pro Bowls during his career. He's a 5-time All-Pro. He was the 1975 NFL Defensive Player of the Year. And he kickstarted a successful 7-year period for the Oilers, during which they went 62-42 and made the playoffs 3 times. So that's Curly Culp.
So, Cris, Brian said they were last. They bring in him. They go to 18th and then 5th. Can one player himself solidify a defense like that?
Yes, he can. Here's the story that I heard about Curly Culp. Don't know if it's true or not, but it's the story I heard that he was, like he said, he was one of the strongest people that's played in the NFL at that time. And he was also a great hand wrestler. They said that one time in the locker room, he beat 2 guys at one time with the right and his left hand. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I wasn't there,
Wow.
but I was told that those rumors would happen. So anybody can beat someone with a right and a left hand arm wrestling, then I think, yes, he can solidify himself as a Hall of Famer and also a Hall of Famer arm wrestler.
Let's move on to linebacker here. We'll do Robert Brazile.
Robert Brazile, one of the coolest nicknames in NFL history. Doom. He was drafted out of Jackson State in 1975, first round. And his instant inclusion into the defense, because they transitioned from a 4-3 to a 3-4 defense under Bum Phillips that year. And he was one of the catalysts of that defense. And that's why he came in. He was 1975 Rookie of the Year. He was a 7-time Pro Bowler, 2-time first-team All-Pro, 4-time second-team All-Pro. He was part of the 70s All-Decade team and voted into the Hall of Fame in 2018. He's 4th in Oilers franchise history with 14 fumble recoveries, or 4th among defenders in fumble recoveries, and he is 8th in total sacks. He's a second in official tackles with over 1,200. And one of the greatest seasons by a linebacker was 1978, where he had 185 tackles. And in the 1978 AFC Championship game, he had 9 tackles and a forced fumble. He also is unofficially credited with 48 sacks. And he was a 6'4", 241-pound linebacker in the 70s, running a 4.6. So that's why he's one of the best Oiler Titans of all time, because he had the size, the speed, and he was a vicious hitter. And you don't get the name Dr. Doom for nothing.
Over 180 tackles in one season. That's incredible. Cris, your thoughts on Robert? Great nickname for one.
Yeah. Well, we used to call ourselves the House of Pain, but he started the Doom before the House of Pain. Robert, I met him once at a function, and I thought he was a defensive lineman, but he said no, he played linebacker, and he was still in such great shape then, and that was in 80, 89, 90 when I met him, and he was a guy being that big playing linebacker is just phenomenal. And plus a lot of his, like I said, I don't know when they started recording or started counting sacks. So if you can go back and count the possible sacks that he possibly had, now all these guys, if you go back and count the possible sacks they possibly had back then, I think the sack record would be so high up there, it'd be hard to break. So a lot of those guys got cheated out of their stats because they didn't start counting sacks till later on in their career.
Right. Well, let's move back to the D line here. We're gonna go Ray Childress. So, defensive tackle, defensive end, nose guard. He played it all. Very versatile. If you grew up in my time period, you know his name because he was the big name on that Houston defense. I played 10 years with him, 85 to 95 with the Oilers. It was still the Oilers at that point. First round pick, 3rd overall out of Texas A&M. So he didn't even have to leave his home state there. So as an Oiler, and this is just as an Oiler, 5-time Pro Bowler, first team All-Pro, and 4-time second team All-Pro. So nice stats there. He set an NFL record with 3 fumble recoveries in one game. Now with Childress at tackle, the Oilers put up 4 of their 8 single season lowest rushing totals in franchise history. So this guy was, a run stopper. He basically would shut down the other team and force them sometimes to throw. And back then, there was a lot more running going on than what there is today. So he's second all time in Oilers sacks, and he's he's got 13 multi-sack games, and he's 6th in tackles. He's got 19 career forced fumbles with 19 fumble recoveries. So quite a few turnovers there. He also has a safety on his resume. Those are always fun to get. And two touchdowns. So just a very solid player. He's also on that 85 all-rookie team. So 10 years with the Houston Oilers. Cris, you played with him for a while. What kind of teammate was he? And was he a leader on that defense?
Oh, Ray was a big-time leader. He wasn't a guy that would say a lot, but he was like that commercial E.F. Hutton. When Ray speak, people listen. Said he's not going to say too much to you, but when he look at you and give you the nod of his head and say something to you, he mean business. He's a guy that just went about his business. He wasn't a big talker or nothing like that, but he just went by his business. The most you're going to get out of him is hello, Dish. That's the most you're going to get out of him. And then, but if things not going right, and he see things not going right, he say about 5 or 6 words, and everybody know that get himself back in order. Ray was more of a, like I said, wasn't a vocal leader. He was more lead by example type of guy, and he's always been that way. He's done such a great job in the Houston community of his foundations and everything else. So me coming in as a rookie, looking up to a guy like a Ray Childress, having him there on the defense really made me be the player I am today, because I knew that every time any type of blitz or any type of pressure was going to happen off that right side, I knew that I can squat a little bit more because I knew Ray would be able to get there.
Right. Well, let's move on to our last linebacker of the night. That's going to be Keith Bullock.
So I got Keith Bullock. He was a first round pick, 30th overall out of Syracuse. Had an 11-year career with the Titans from the year 2000 to 2010. During that time, he had a streak of 126 consecutive games. He was a huge playmaker for the Titans, a real enforcer or X factor in creating turnovers. He was second in fumble recoveries in Titans history. Also, during the merger of the Titans, he's second in fumble recoveries by a defensive player, but first in defensive touchdowns. He's a one-time Pro Bowler and 3-time All-Pro from the year 2002, 2003, and 2007. A huge enforcer in the passing game, causing 72 pass deflections, also forced 15 fumbles and had over 1,100 tackles in his career. I honestly feel as if, even though he did play in the 21st century, I almost feel like if he was drafted in today's time where it's more passing, he could have been used different. I know my colleague Rollo here is a huge advocate for outside linebackers that play in the 4-3, and what she did and still was able to make a huge impact for the Titans.
So Bullock comes in 2000. He really kind of took the league by storm. This guy was dominant for a long time. I think he was in the shadow there a little bit of some other great linebackers like Ray Lewis and things like that. But this guy has the numbers that could put him in the top of everything. Cris, what are your thoughts on Bullock?
Did you say 1,100 tackles and 72 pass defense? I think he's still in the ice tub right now. That's what I think Bullock is with 1,100 tackles. Wow, that is very impressive. I didn't know he had numbers like that. But that is very impressive with 1,100 tackles and 72 pass defense. Just think if he had good hands and caught half of those, he would be up in the all-time interception leader as far as the Titans Oilers. Because I know I didn't get all my interceptions with the Titans or the Oilers, but 72 pass defense, if he just caught half of those or a third of those, he would probably been up there as far as interceptions also.
Brian, I just wanted to ask you a quick question. I'm looking at that draft where Bullock is drafted. Here's some other linebackers that went: Urlacher, Arrington, Julian Peterson. I mean, that's a pretty good class.
That is a good class. That was the 99 class, I believe, right?
2000.
The 2000 class. Okay, yeah, that was a heck of a class. Yeah, and then like you said, Ray was doing his thing in Baltimore. There was some great linebackers in Pittsburgh as well. So yeah, it was. I think for me, I feel like Bullock kind of flew under the radar too, much like Casey. He was sitting there doing his thing, but there was it was a great time to be a linebacker, I guess, in the NFL at that time because the focus was kind of shifted everywhere.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the really fun positions on the field, and that's going to be the secondary. So we're going to go to Ken Houston.
Mr. Ken Houston, drafted in the 9th round from Prairie View A&M, and had one of the greatest seasons by a defensive back ever. We'll touch on that in just a little bit. But in 6 seasons, he had 25 interceptions with the Oilers, 9 of which went for a pick 6. So let me put that in perspective. Almost 40% of his interceptions he returned for a touchdown. Almost 36%. That's almost 40%. That's insane. He had 11 forced fumbles, 11 total return touchdowns. In 1971, he set the record for return touchdowns with 5, which was eventually broken in 2006 by the ridiculous Devin Hester. He's one of just 3 defenders in NFL history to return 4 interceptions in one season. In a game in 1970 and 1971, he had 2 pick 6s in a 34-second span. Returned 2 pick 6s, picked the pass off. They kicked off. He picked off the pass the next play. That's insane. 5 of his 6 seasons, he went to the Pro Bowl. 5 of the 6 seasons, he was second team All-Pro. He was named to the 75th anniversary team. He's the only Oiler Titan on that list. He's on the all 70s all decade team. He was a first ballot Hall of Famer in 1986. And let me read this. One of the greatest seasons by defensive back all time. In 1971, he had 9 interceptions, 220 return yards, and 4 pick sixes. That's ridiculous. And so he was eventually traded to the Redskins in 1973 for Jim Snowden, Mac Alston, Clifton McNeil, Mike Finucci, and Jeff Severson. Who are they? Only 1 Pro Bowl amongst all of them. He went to 7 Pro Bowls in Washington. Ken Houston, greatest Bullet Titan of all time. Book it.
Cris, when we do our top 5 shows, we don't rank them, but in your opinion, is Ken Houston number 1?
With those numbers, yes. Well, you can't argue. He was prime time before prime time. You know, you said he had 2 touchdowns within a 30 or 40-second period.
34 seconds.
Interception touchdowns yes, that's sucks. That's prime time before prime time right there. So if he just had his little towel and his commercials and everything like that, he would have. He set the bar. Ken Houston set the bar way high. You know, playing defense back there in Houston, you heard a lot about Ken Houston. You know, being from an HBCU, coming over there playing and doing the things he did, it's like incredible. You know, so my hat's always off to a guy like Ken Houston, and such a great role model too, for me also when I was there. So, but like I said, I take my hat off to Ken Houston. I'm a huge Ken Houston fan, so I always have him number 1 between him and Alvin Bethea. They're always 1 and 2 in my heart.
Okay, let's you mentioned Alvin Bethea. Let's move on to him.
All right, Alvin Bethea. 1968 to 1983 with the Oilers. I believe he's the longest tenured Oiler of any of the guys we're talking about tonight. 16 seasons. He had 210 career games as an Oiler, which is the second most in franchise history. Alvin was 6'2", 260 pounds. He came out of the HBCU of North Carolina A&T. He was taken round 3 by the Oilers in the 1968 draft. Played right defensive end, and he was just a menace to quarterbacks and running backs for most of his career. He had 105 career QB sacks, which is the most in franchise history. He topped 10 sacks in 6 seasons. He had 14 and a half sacks in 1976, but somehow didn't make the Pro Bowl. That said, he was able to make a trip to the Pro Bowl 8 times. Only Bruce Matthews and Mike Munchak have gone to more Pro Bowls in Oilers Titans franchise history. He was also able to turn the ball over for his team. In 1972, he led the NFL with 5 fumble recoveries. He recorded 2 safeties during his career. No other Oiler Titan has had more. So he was the anchor of the defense for a very long time. 8 Pro Bowls, should be more, 2 All-Pros. His number 65 is retired by the franchise. He's in the Ring of Honor, and he is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So that's Alvin Bethea.
So it seems like the Oilers Titans franchise has had a lot of great D linemen. This guy certainly fits that bill, and he had to go up against some really great running backs with Franco Harris down there in Pittsburgh. Probably, he was with Earl Campbell, so he didn't have to face that one. But what are your thoughts on Bethea? And I mean, there's a lot of good defensive tackles and linemen to pick from today.
It's very humbling to actually be on this call with you guys and be able to talk about these guys like that. You know, you hear them, you don't know all their stats, you know some of their stats, but to hear you gentlemen run down their stats, I'm trying to figure out why Cris Dishman's on this list. You know, that's what I'm trying to figure out, because you got Kenny Houston, Alvin Bethea, Jarrell Casey, you know, Keith Bullock, Curly Culp. It's like, wow, these guys have done it all. And like I said, Alvin Bethea has just been a huge role model for me in Houston itself. And just to hear his numbers right then and there, I'm like, I knew he was good, but I didn't know he was that great. You know, so I'm just happy to be mentioned in the same ballpark of these guys right here. You know, because you have some hell of it'll be a hard job to pick 11. it'd be an extremely hard job to pick the top 5. So to just pick 11 guys, so you got Alvin, Kenny, Robert, you could just go down the line and put all them on defense, no matter if they linebackers or whatever, just put them all 11 out there and they can play with any position they can. Well, Kenny Houston's stats, he can play corner and safety. So Kenny could take the left side of the field and just make sure no one even get the ball. But like I said, you got some great names on this list. It's going to be extremely hard to pick 5.
Well, let me go ahead and tell you why Cris Dishman is on this list. So, some guy named Cris Dishman, as Brian would say. So, cornerback, 5th round pick out of Purdue. Played for the Oilers from 88 to 96. Now, with the Oilers, he's got a first-team All-Pro, and he was a Pro Bowler. So he's got that going for him. He's got 31 interceptions with the Oilers. Now, that puts him 2nd all-time in Oilers-Titans franchise history. And he's got 12 fumble recoveries and 11 forced fumbles. So that puts him 10th all-time. So if you combine those turnovers, he is number 1 all-time for turnovers in team history. Nothing can change a game more than a turnover. We all know that. We have all seen the games where everything is in hand and going well, and then boom, the turnover, game change, momentum change, just craziness happens after that. So that is a big part of why Cris Dishman is on this list.
Mm-hmm.
So just a little more information on him, because obviously we're going to have a Q&A with him, and we're going to talk to him about his career here in a little bit. But he's 7th all-time in solo tackles on the Oilers. He's got 5 touchdowns with the Oilers, and he even has 1 punt return. So got that 1 punt return in there. So
yeah, I got to tell you a story about that punt return. It wasn't really a punt return.
There you go. Give us that story. That'll be what we ask you about yourself.
It was one of those things. I was supposed to be getting out the way, and the ball hit me, so I had to grab the ball. So they actually listed that as a punt return? Wow, I'll take it.
You got the
I would
stats.
definitely take it, but it was one of those Peter, get out the way, and I'm looking, didn't see the ball, and the ball hit me. And so once it hit me, I figured that I better pick it up and run. I didn't want to go back to the sideline and get cursed out. So I just picked the ball up and ran and scored. So
I thought maybe it was like a flubbed punt or something, and you just
no. I wish it was a great story where it was a 50-yard punt and I caught it over my head with one finger and ran it back for a 68-yard touchdown. As I get older, I may tell that type of story, but right now I got to tell you the truth. Yeah, it was one of those balls that hit me. It wasn't when you said punt return, I was like, when did I have a punt return? But then when you kept talking, I was like, oh, he's talking about when the ball hit me in the back of my leg. That wasn't no punt return, but we can call it that. I accept that.
Well, they gave you the return stat for it, so there you go.
Wow!
All right.
See how stats can be alarming sometimes.
Well, let's move into our vote tonight. Everybody can't pick your own as usual. Dion, you're in my top corner, so you got first pick tonight.
For best all time, right?
Top 5, yep.
Top 5. I'm struggling. I have Houston number 1.
All right, so Houston will be your pick then. We're all picking.
Oh, okay, all right. I know Houston. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, Houston.
No problem. Rollo, you're up. Go ahead.
All right, so I got to put Keith Bullock in that conversation because he was the heart and soul of that defense, and I saw that defense quite several times a year against the Steelers. So Keith Bullock.
Okay. Brian.
Wow, I mean, this is a very impressive list. This is really, really difficult, but I've got to go with Dr. Doom. That guy, he brought an attitude to that defense, man, and just a legendary nickname, and he lived up to it.
Okay. So I'm gonna take Curly Cole. I like how the defense just completely changed. I mean, you were last ranked defense, and a year later they're up there at 5th. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So that brings it to you, Cris.
Bethea. Well, I got to go with Bethea then for sure. That's the guy on my list, Bethea. I thought someone already picked him. I'm sorry. I got to go with Elvin.
Well, there you have it.
Hall of Famer. You got to go with the Hall of Famers all first. So
Our top 5 Oilers / Titans defense is Robert Brazile, Ken Houston, Keith Bullock, Curly Culp, and Alvin Bethea. It's a nice job tonight, guys. It looks like Rollo and Brian, you both got 2 on the list. So, Brian, I'll give you first question, and Rollo, you'll be after Brian.
All right, Cris. Well, during your career with the Oilers, the offense of that team had that very exciting run and shoot, thing going with Warren Moon, Lorenzo White, Drew Hill, Ernest Gibbons, etc. So, what was it like going against that Oilers offense in practice? And during games, a lot of times they would score really quickly. So, did that put some sort of extra pressure on the defense during that time?
Let me answer your first question about the practice. I used to love going against those guys in practice because I felt like if I can shut down any of those receivers, then the game was not going to be as hard as I thought it would be. Haywood Jeffries, Ernest Gibbons, Drew Hill, Tony Jones, Curtis Duncan. You could go on. And it was only offense, only played one back, but had a legitimate 4 of our running backs could go and play for someone else. Mike Rozier, Alonzo Highsmith, Alan Pinkett, Lorenzo White, who got drafted at the same time I got drafted. So you're talking about a lot of guys that can make a one person miss and go the distance. Then you talk about the phenomenal quarterback we had, Warren Moon. Then our offensive line with Bruce and Mike and Dean Steinkooler and, just Jay Pennison, who's our unsung hero. But, just offensively itself, we had a lot of guys who can make plays. So going against them during practice was it was good for defensively. It helped us in far as game time situations. So I love going against them on that one. And then I talked so long. What was your second question?
I was talking about a lot of times that offense would score very quickly. So did that put added pressure on the defense?
No, it didn't, because defensively we want them to score because it gives us an opportunity to go out there and try to make plays. Like I said, I'm coaching right now, and I tell my players that stop whining and crying. The offense not doing this, they doing this. Don't look at no one but yourself. So take this as an opportunity as you going out there and making a play. If the offense turn the ball over, so what? It's your opportunity to go back and get a turnover. So it's give you more opportunity to be on the field to make a play.
Rollo.
You are part of one of the most memorable plays and calls in NFL history with the Antonio Freeman. That catch was. What was the feeling on the sidelines after that happened? And what was the feeling when he started running into the end zone once you thought he dropped? It was an incomplete pass.
Well, once I looked up at the telecam, the cam up top, when I saw he caught it, I just walked into the locker room because I said, "Oh, shucks, he ended up catching that ball." And I also use that as a coachable moment of telling my players to always finish the play. And it's a prime example why I didn't finish the play. 2 series before that, Antonio Freeman did something similar to that. The ball bounced, he scooped it up, took off running, the refs blew the whistle. So, I didn't think nothing of it. And then when he did it just then, I thought for sure he was doing the same thing he did 2 or 3 series ago and just scooping it up and running into the end zone. But as it kept playing, I kept watching it, walking off the field. I said another word, but I'm saying darn it right now. I said, darn it, he actually caught that football. So I use it as a life lesson to always finish. Don't assume that you make the play. I had a couple of opportunities to tackle him right then and there, but I didn't think he caught it. And that's a prime example that in football and in life, you can never assume, because then and then it's probably about 10 or 15 years later, people still talking about it. So that's a life lesson that I always give my children now and give the guys that I coach. Don't always assume. Just make the play and go ahead and make the tackle and finish.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris. I was talking to the guys before the show start. I'm hoping I don't send bad luck to my Buckeyes by putting your picture up. But yeah, I'm a huge college football fan, and I just want to know, what was your experience like at Purdue?
It was a great experience at Purdue. I came in as a receiver at Purdue. And then I was switched on the first day, how the offense, when they have the whole team, offense stay in one area, defense go in another area. And I was a receiver, and I can still remember today, our coach Ron Mims came and told me, it was calling my name, Dishman, let's go. Defense over here. And me being the arrogant person I was back then, and I'm a receiver, I'm catching footballs, and I'm scoring touchdowns. I thought it was another Dishman. I didn't think he was talking about me. So I figured it was another Dishman somewhere around. And he told me that I was on defense. And I was like, oh, wow, I don't want to play defense. I came here to play offense. And lo and behold, God working in great ways, that the only seat available was to sit. I sit by a guy named Rod Woodson. And the only seat was left because I was the last one in the room. I sit by a guy named Rod Woodson, and he looked and he saw my frustration in my face and in my body language, and he reached over and hit me and like, man, you be all right. We be good. You be all right. And from that point on, he showed me some ways of playing defensive back, and the rest was history. I guess a lot of people are smarter than I was. I wanted to play receivers and catch balls, and they said, nope, you're going to make a career playing defensive back.
So you coached in the NFL Europe, the CFL, college, and now you're at a prep school. Like, what do you feel is easier coaching players wise, like professionals, or is it college, or just the young kids? And which did you enjoy the most?
I coached in all the FLs, XFL, NFL, CFL. The CFL was kind of strange. Coaching defensive back in the CFL when the receivers are moving and it's only 3 downs. And second down, when your special team coach calling for the punt team, and I keep telling him, hey, man, no, it's not punt team. He's like, this is only 3 downs. That was kind of weird, but I had a great time. What's more enjoyable is coaching, period. I just love coaching at any level. I love game planning. I love trying the X and O's or trying to figure out what the offense is going to do against us. I love recruiting. When I coached in college, I love recruiting because recruiting to me is like playing a game. You got to win. You got to go get the best guys. In order to save your job, you got to go get the best guys. And coaching here, that's the same thing we're doing. We're trying to get the best guys, try to give them the best knowledge possible. And that way they can be better husbands, better brothers, better uncles, and better sons. And whatever that I can rub off, my little knowledge I have can rub off on any of those guys that I've coached and gonna coach, then it is what it is. That's what we're here to do on earth, is to give back. And I think that's one of my callings, is to give back to what I know. Some people take it and some people don't.
Brian?
Well, I got to ask this one. Jerry Glanville, let's just say he had a colorful personality. What was it like playing for Glanville? And do you have any funny Glanville stories you'd like to share?
Do we have enough time on this show for the Glanville story? Oh my goodness, I'd be way past my bedtime with those stories. I got a lot of Glanville stories. Here's one. Glanville used to call me the future. He's always called me the future. So New York Jets, we played the New York Jets. I think it was in 88 or 89. I made it my first start, one of my first starts. And Wesley Walker, the receiver, beat me for 2 touchdowns. And it wasn't even halftime. He beat me for 2 touchdowns, okay? So Glanville came over to the bench and sit by me, and he said, Future, guess what? I said, what, coach? He said, I'm going to have to pull you from the game because you're killing us. I said, Coach, no, I'm going to get him next time. He said, no, Future, your time is over. He said, but guess what, Future? Not that many people saw it. So don't worry about the touchdowns. Nobody saw it. And he walked away, and I was like, oh, yeah, no one saw the touchdowns. And I realized, I said, hold on, there's 70,000 some people in this stadium. All these people saw the touchdowns. What do you mean no one saw the touchdowns? But that was one of Coach Glanville's ways to keep you loose. You know, he was such a fun-loving guy, such a player's coach. He always wants you to be loose. You know, of course, he put me back in the second half and played and whatever. But fortunately, I didn't get beat for no more touchdown by Wesley Walker. But Glanville was such a fun-loving, loose guy. And he did that, the tickets, just to keep everybody loose. He felt like if all the pressure, if all the media was on him, they wouldn't be on the players and the coaches.
Rollo.
You were on that team when Gus Frerotte did the headbutt himself, right? Weren't you on that?
Yes, I was on that.
What was the locker room like after that?
I've been on some colorful teams now. Okay. I started at one point. I'm thinking, hold on, is the team or is it me? What the world's going on? You know. Yes, I was on that team when Russ did that and messed up our playoff hopes it messed up our playoff hopes. But you know, it was strange being in there because we was kind of upset at him. But you know, at that time he was just excited. You know, he's excited. He was a young quarterback. You know, he was excited that he done something great, and I didn't think he expected that brick wall to be behind that. So, you know, because when you touch it, it feels soft, but if you go in deeper, I didn't think he expected that big brick wall to be there to give himself a concussion like that.
Dion, go ahead.
All right, Cris. I always wanted to know. I mean, in today's league, you know, the draft is just this big, publicized event now. What was the draft process like for you back then?
Well, I had this huge party. I'm talking about it was like a huge. It was probably about I think it was 3 people there. My mom, my dad, and I. That's my big party. Okay. We was in West Lafayette, Indiana, and my mom and dad drove up for that day. I got a call. I was a 5th round pick. Okay. So I got a call. It was around about 8:30, almost 8:30, 9 o'clock. So I could stay up early. I could stay up a little bit longer then. I was younger, so I could stay up longer. But today, if they try to call me, I'd be sleeping, miss my draft party. So by 8:30, 9 o'clock, I got a call from Holloway, Mike Holloway, God rest his soul, and Coach Nick Saban. He called me and said, "Hey, we got the next pick. We're gonna take you. So stay by your phone." Then I talked to Coach Saban. He told me to come prepared, come ready, get ready to go. That don't come in like a rookie, and come in and keep myself in shape and start fussing at me then. So then I told my mom. My mom and I was sitting there watching Andy Griffin shows, and she yelled back to my dad, who was in bed, and told him, "Hey, Billy, that Cris is getting drafted by those Houston Oilers in Houston." So my dad said, "All right, Dan, well, let's go." They was about to get up. My dad was about to get up and go back home. I was like, "But Mom and Dad, y'all can stay tonight and, you know, let's finish watching our shows." And so that's what I did on my big draft day. It was my mom, my dad, and I at my apartment there in West Lafayette, Indiana. My dad was asleep. My mom and I was watching Andy Griffin shows. So I didn't have the hula of the 25 and 30 people around me, you know, the 3-day affair in New York, nothing like that. And plus I was drafted so late in the 5th round, and they already drafted a guy in the 2nd round, and they already had 4 corners on the team. It wasn't a lot of people expecting me to make that team. And that's what I love about myself, that I'm a fighter, I'm a getter, and I'm a workhorse. And you may can count me out, but I'm never going to count myself out. And whatever my plan, whatever God's plan for me, I'm going to make sure it come true.
So today's NFL, the rules are highly stacked against the defense, especially defensive backs. You touch somebody, you're getting a pass interference call. You can't hit like you used to. Do you feel that you would be able to play in today's NFL with the rules the way they are, or did you hit too hard? And then also tell us about the Safe Beat initiative.
Yes, I figure that I can play in the NFL. I'll be frustrated every game now. Trust me, I'll be frustrated every game, and I will be. I will have a lot of fines. I will tell you that much, because I will be very frustrated at the refs. And I'm the type of person don't really keep quiet. So if a reporter asks me a question after the game, I will be blasting the refs. So that will probably be a fine right there. But it's today's game. It's so different as far as defensive backs. They always had the 5-year rule, but they never really enforced it. Now you could be on the other side of the field, hit a person after 5 yards, don't have no effect on a play on the other side of the field, but yet still they throw a flag, it's a penalty. Now, I think someone who's smarter than me should go back and reevaluate that rule. And if it's not affecting the play, then they shouldn't call the penalty. And one, they should not allow the penalty to stand. That's the old defense, that's the defensive back in me. But fans love football. They just don't want to see scoring. They just don't want to see 55 to 42 games. They love football. They love offense. They love defense. They love special teams. They just love the game of football. And I think if you keep having the game the way it's going now, we're going to lose the love of the fans, of football. Because it's not going to be football. It's got to be called something else. You got to call it. Got to have the flags out like you did when you first started playing, and everybody had to go pull the yellow and red flags, But I hope they do change some of the rules. The quarterbacks these days are highly protected. You even blow by a quarterback with a shoulder and hit him, then you're going to get a flag. So and I can see why Brady can play as long as he can play. Yes, he is a great quarterback, but he have no fear of getting hit. So if he has no fear of getting hit, then I can sit back in my pocket and I'm gonna wait for the guys get open, and knowing that if a guy brushed by me and hit me and I do a little flopping, then I'm gonna get a penalty. So, but yeah, like I said, I think will be able to play in today's game, but I'll be very frustrated. SafeBeat is an organization that my wife and I has gotten involved with, and it's for kids of getting heart screening. It's so many young kids, you hear about passing out, not having a proper heart screening of playing sports and football. And we got involved in that, and it's been really good for us because we just try to give back as much as possible. And like I said before, that you're on earth to live, to love God, and to give back to the ones who's less needy than you.
Right. Well, thank you to NFL All-Pro Cris Dishman joining us tonight, talking some Houston Oilers and Titans. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you guys for having me. You guys actually beat my bedtime. See there?
All right.
Anytime, guys, y'all give me a call. And like I said, thanks a lot for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was really fun of doing this. It's a pleasure to hear you guys' knowledge of the game. Of hear you read down all the stats of the Kenny Houstons, the Alvin Bethea, the Curly Culps. The Houston Oilers is a good organization. It was a good organization, and then the Titans. Now there's the Titans, so you can see some great football history in that organization.
Well, everybody who's been watching, make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever you're listening or watching on. Everyone have a great night. Thank you for joining us.
All right, guys, have a great one.
Clear.